It's going.
Hello.
Somebody's here. Oh, hello there. Yes, hello, Judy.
Hello.
Hello there. Goodbye.
Goodbye.
No. I was talking to Dana on the phone
Oh,
because we were saying, where is everybody?
well, we couldn't get in.
Yep. Hi there. I didn't realize that I had to let everybody in. I'm still on a work call that should end momentarily.
Oh, I think once we're in, we could chat. We can
Yeah,
start, so that's not a problem.
Yep, I
But
think
thank you.
we can-
Yeah, we didn't have the ability to get in.
Yeah, I didn't realize that me signing in was gonna let everybody else in.
But good to see everybody. It's nice that everybody didn't go home and just,
We were home.
I know there's the advantage. It's not like the school bus. You got 5
Yeah,
minutes and then
Zoom
we're
is
out of
wonderful.
there.
Okay.
The beauties of Zoom.
Okay.
Yeah. All right. I know that I heard from Barb and who else were there? Lots of emails going back and forth, guys. Barb and oh shoot. All right, so Tony just responded. Let's see who else we missing.
Tony's got the with selectmen's meeting.
Yeah, well, we couldn't get in, so we tried to get Tony.
Okay.
Who is the host?
It wasn't Tony.
Deborah is here. Good, that's good. So we're Barbara missing. We're missing Allison.
Barbara and Allison are know what's up.
They do?
Yeah, they were corresponding as well.
Oh no, do they know that we're in now?
No, they probably don't.
Right. So let me just send a quick note.
Oh, dear.
Hey, listen, it's not any fun if we don't
And you have Chief Furlong as well.
Oh,
Hi
right.
there. And I saw Austin as I thought.
He's on, apparently, without a picture.
All right, so I just sent a note to Barb and to Allison. Well, I think I copied everybody.
Oh, that's fine.
All right, because hey, Austin, Barbara's going to take minutes, so we certainly want her to come.
Right.
Well, how's everybody doing tonight since we're here?
All right. And you, Judy?
Great, thank you for asking. Great. We come home next week, and so, but it's been glorious.
Oh, where are you, Florida?
For the last 3 months. It's been great.
Oh, sad.
I had found out that I was born to be a snowbird. I had to be this old before I knew that. I was born to be a snowbird. Who knew? It's great. Let's see, Bob's the host. Let's see, no, Bobby's okay. Let's see, Town Hall just called in. Let's try it again.
Yeah, that's better.
Right.
There's Allison. Excellent. Hi.
Did you send out a link? Hi, Allison. I don't know if Barbara has gotten a link. She was trying for a long time to get in.
It's on the community calendar.
It wasn't
Right.
that you couldn't, it wasn't the lack of link. It was the fact that, we couldn't
right.
get in.
Right.
So let me just remind her that, and I did just send a note. Okay, I'll send that again. And who else would we be missing?
Dan McMacken.
Oh, Dan's missing.
I just
Heard from him too, that he couldn't get on.
Yeah, I just chatted with him.
Oh,
I
is Peter here?
need to send him the link in a minute.
I don't see Peter.
Oh, me.
No, and Julie wasn't going to come tonight, right? So, yeah, actually the new website is terrific. I mean, really terrific, because you can go right to the calendar and click on it and it gets you in. I love the new website, Allison. It's good.
Yeah, much better than the old website.
So much better. So much
Mhm.
better. The calendar's up to date. It's easy to find stuff. It's much better.
Yeah, I agree. Kristen Taylor did a lot of work on it, so
Oh, you can tell.
kudos to her.
Yeah, grateful that you did.
Yeah.
When I went to the link that was on the town website, I couldn't click on the link actually from the website. I
Yeah,
had
for
to
some
delete-
reason today I couldn't either, so I had to copy and paste it into a
Me-
browser.
That's what
But
I
you
did.
usually are able to, so I don't know. It must have just been something with the posting today.
Well, it works to put it in the browser, so.
Shoot.
I don't know where Barbara is. She was
She's
on the
watching.
email.
She's watching the email, I know. Or she was.
She was. We were talking to her. So
I had a
let me get the link and I'll send it out. Hold on a second. Let's try that again. Try this. She said, so it says host has another meeting in progress. That's weird. Try that. All right, so I just sent her the link. But who else are we missing?
Peter and Dan, right?
Peter and Dan. Dan Mackinac, right? All right. I sent the link from the one that I used anyway. Oh, here comes Barb.
Barbara.
Aha,
Yay!
great. Good.
Well, now you're exhausted and it's time to go home.
It is time to go home, yeah. Half an hour late.
Okay. Let me get this bigger. All right. I am hoping that we can approve the minutes, but who is going to be the host?
I'll host
Judy.
until Bob's ready. He's on another, he's working. He's got a work call.
Okay. Thank you, Judy.
All right, so for, we're still waiting for Peter and Dan. Maybe we could just do one, two, do we have
Austin is here.
1, 2? I think we have a quorum. Excuse me while I get out all my fingers. All right, so let's start out then. How about, can we approve the meeting minutes that,
Right. That's what I'm going to be taking the minutes for Julie.
So
So
I'm going to butt in here for just a second, and we need to call the meeting to order. So at
Oh, thank you.
7:28, we will call the meeting to order. Present from the Finance Committee is Bob Vanderslice, Judy Zahora, Deborah Warren. This is in Zoom order. Dana Sheehan, DeWitt Brown, Barbara Beatty. And then there are actually numerous guests, kind of notable: Austin Antrim, Fire Chief, and the Police Chief, Tim, as well. And I got to go back to this other one for just a sec.
All right, well, thank you for calling the meeting to order. So that said, can we have a recommendation for approval of the minutes?
I'd like
Recommend to
to,
approve the minutes.
I second.
Second,
Any questions? Barbara, did you have a comment?
No, I have them here.
Oh, okay, thank you. All right, well, then no comments? All in favor, can we have a roll call?
Warrant, aye.
Beatty, aye.
Brown eye.
GNI.
Vanderslice, aye.
Sahora, aye. Oh, we didn't get Deb. Deborah?
Yeah, she
Oh,
did
Warrant,
say,
aye.
Oh, I'm
she was
sorry.
first.
Okay. Thank you for that. I was still hoping we get Peter and I sent the link out. Barbara, but the link that I sent, is that the one you used?
Yes, the new one you sent,
Okay.
and that worked.
All right. Shoot.
A quorum.
The other one kept
What is it?
saying that the host was sponsoring another meeting.
Oh, where is that? Well, I hope that they've called in and they've looked at their email for that. How weird. All right, so let's see what's on the a budget updates from the town administrator and accountants. So Allison, you want to go with that?
Yeah, I mean, I don't really have too much to update. Tony is on the Board of Selectmen meeting tonight, so that's why he's not here, and they have a lengthy agenda. He is presenting a couple of budget adjustments to them, but once those are approved, I'll, send those along to you and we can discuss those at our next meeting. There are just some changes to the water and sewer budget based on assessment information that we received from Lynn Water and Sewer. So I'll be able to present those to you after the selectmen approve them.
Thank you very much. Any questions for Allison? All right, hearing none. Next up is the review of the police budget. So if you'd like to start with that, that'd be terrific.
Okay. Good evening, everybody. For those that don't know me, I'm Tim Furlong, Chief of Police. I don't know how you want to do this. This is my first attempt at this, so I don't know if you want to go line item by line item, if you guys have specific questions.
Well, I think who was the liaison that met with you, Chief?
Uh,
Barbara?
Yeah,
Dan
Barbara.
and
Grant.
I did.
Okay.
And Chief Furlong, did Mariana make a PowerPoint for you or not?
No, we were actually advised not to, so we don't have one.
Oh, okay.
All right. Well, then how do you think is best to approach it, Barbara? Do you want to just maybe what I'd like to know is what's the difference between this year's budget and last year's budget?
Well, do you want us to call you Chief Furlong? Is that
You can call me Tim, that's fine.
okay? Hi, Tim.
I've been called worse.
Why don't you summarize for us what the main differences are? Because you did a great job doing that when we met with you.
Thank you, I appreciate that.
And then
So-
mention also, so summarize the differences, and then you might also mention what you see prospectively coming up, because we talked
Okay.
about that too.
Yep. So as far as the, excuse me, salaries go, there really isn't much change aside from contractual increases. On the other side of the budget, there's some slight increases and there's reasons for it. The biggest reason is the police reform. As you all know, the Police Reform Act passed and the creation of posts, which is police officer standard and training. They have come down with certain mandates that we're going to have to go through. The biggest of which I think personally is the certification and accreditation process for the department. And then individually, the officers are going to have to get certified. However, with, excuse me, with the building itself, there's going to have to be some renovations. I know last year there was talk of looking into public safety building. I know there's further talk this year. I don't know how far out we are. However, in the absence of a public safety building, the Nahant Police Building is going to need some major upgrades just based on the police reform. One thing, for example, is we need to update our evidence room with more strict access. We also need an interview room with audio video equipment. And my biggest concern right now is building a female locker room. As you may know, we just hired our first female full-time police officer. She's currently in the police academy. So I feel as though she deserves to have her own space at the police station, which is an additional cost. Further on down the road, with more police reform, I feel that body cameras are going to be mandated. I'm holding off. That's a huge expense initially, and then maintenance and storage and all that. So,
Chief, can I ask a question?
yep,
Do you
absolutely.
want questions in the middle or how would you like
That's
that?
fine.
All right, so the body cameras, if it's a state requirement, does that come with a grant money?
So there are grants right now. It's not a mandate yet. I personally feel that Post is going to mandate all.
Right, but with
agencies.
mandates, do mandates come with money? That's the question.
Usually, yes. But again, it's the initial cost that will help with the grant. However, like the storage and processing of that's technically evidence at that point.
So we understand historically that the police facility needs upgrades. The
Mhm.
same way we understand the same thing with the fire department facilities.
Right. Yep.
And I don't know that now long years that I've been on this finance and advisory committee, there's been a lot of talk about a combined safety facility, municipal facility, I think you call it, or something like that. Which I can't see that that's within the next year or so. But so how much money do we continue to put into these buildings? That's really my question. And it because it's really just sunk once we do that.
I agree.
So
Okay,
I
well,
can
I've
jump
got
in
nothing.
quickly, Judy. We are proposing through the budget process to use some of our free cash for a feasibility study for a public safety building. There was obviously a study done years ago. It's old now. The chiefs, Tony and I, are meeting with an architect next week to discuss that and get a quote on what that would cost. So we're hoping to be able to go forward with that. But like you said, in the meantime, the fire station definitely needs some work, and we've put some free cash into the FY23 budget for that, and the same with the police station. So we've funded the building out of the women's locker room. We have talked with Chief Furlong. The money that we have in there right now is not sufficient to meet that need. And so what we're considering is using some of that ARPA funding to fund the difference. So Tony and I are going to kind of play around with the puzzle pieces and be able to fund.
I mean, the question to me is, are you building in addition to the building? Because you have a fixed space, which already wasn't enough space. How are you building another room in there?
I thought they were repurposing.
No, go ahead.
No, I just thought that there was you were repurposing some other room for the women's locker room?
Correct.
I don't understand, because I thought that all of your rooms were used fully. So I just don't understand. I just don't understand where the space is coming from.
Yeah,
I can say, Tim showed us that the idea was to, as you put it, Deborah, to cut one room right in half. Was that it?
Yep.
And sort of repurpose it. It'll make one of the rooms smaller. It'll be divided in half. Wasn't that the idea?
Correct.
What was the room used for before division?
So it's an old school building. So we kind of use it for whatever we can. Training, investigations, mainly investigations and report writing, but it's a fairly good sized room that we could divide and create that locker room for her and the other female officers that we have.
I thought you said this was your first female officer.
Full-time, we have a couple reserves and my administrative assistant also, Mariana.
All right. All right, then, well, thank you. And then Allison, when you and is it both chiefs are meeting with the architect or just Chief Furlong?
Nope, both are. Actually, Chief Antrim is the one that sought out the architect and set up the meeting, so.
All right, well, that's true. I just want to make certain everybody had a voice. But I am concerned too, because the feasibility study had been done years ago and I'm certain it's out of date, but nothing happened. So to spend money with a feasibility study when we really don't think it's ever going to be feasible doesn't make sense to me.
Mhm.
So are we saying then as a town, we do think it's feasible and this time we'll go through?
Judy, if you like, I can elaborate on that whole
Thank you.
process and the idea behind the next step when Chief Furlong is through this presentation, if that makes sense.
Yes,
Yeah,
thank you
so-
very much. And so I didn't mean to derail your presentation, Chief. I just was trying to figure out the, particularly starting up with the body cameras, if there's a mandate, do they pay for mandates? That's all.
Okay, I have gotten rid of my left coasters. And I'm back.
Yes, but we solved world peace while you were gone,
I
Bob.
know you were doing an awesome job. I was listening. If we can only work on Ukraine now.
God, that'd be terrific. All right.
Um,
So thank you. All right, then Bob, you want to take
All right,
over
so-
again? That'd be
So
great.
Chief, and first of all, like, this is like a personal thank you to your department, in particular to Gino, for helping with a snowstorm, and he'll know what I mean.
Okay, I'll pass it along.
He'll know exactly what I'm talking about. But you mentioned a couple of things. There were several needs to rework the station house, right? It was not just the women's locker room, but there was also an evidence room and something else. How far has that gotten? Do we have what we would think of as a firm estimate or firm idea
No.
how much it would
No,
cost?
Bob.
Do we have an approach to it? And I think that's Dan McMacken that has joined us.
Dan, did you have something
Dan-
to add?
Dan ringing in, Ms. Beatty and I went to, met with the chief. He does not have any biddable documents. The evidence room seems to be something that we are anticipating over the horizon as we are fearful that the state will have new compliance regulations. He has an order of magnitude of the female locker room, in the $20-30 guess range. No hard bids, a rough concept of how it should be executed. I support the idea of Barbara. Barbara, are you here?
Yes.
Yeah, Dan,
We-
I'm taking minutes.
Oh, good girl. What fun. I'm parked in my driveway. It's
Well, thank you for that.
but there's nothing pressing for the evidence room or other things. That was a over the horizon warning that we may be subject to state compliance measures as they institute new levels of police professionalism. There may be training, there may be it's its own thing, and we don't yet know what it will entail. What we do know is that a female locker room is appropriate and indicated now. And Barbara, correct me if I'm wrong. I think we're looking in the $20,000-$30,000 range of drywall, wiring, and HVAC.
That sounds about right. That's, I think, what we discussed when we were there.
All right, and Chief Furlong, you want to weigh in on that?
So as far as the cost,
Well, yeah, the cost and the approach. So the approach being the immediate need is the female locker room. The other things are not an immediate need, but they're more of let's keep an eye on these kind of a thing.
Exactly. That's, as I stated, we have a female officer in the academy. She's slated to graduate late June. She's currently sharing the locker room when she was working with the men. And as far as the projected construction, yes, it's possibly mandated by the state.
Okay, and is there any,
I-
are there
I
any
think-
economies of scale in doing all of these things together, even if the evidence room and the rest of it is not firm at this point, or not, you know what I'm trying to say? If you're gonna have a contractor there doing something, would it make sense to do all of it together?
Yeah, can I weigh in as a building guy?
Please.
There's obviously an economy of scale for mobilizations. The bigger the job, the better the bid. But the problem here is we don't have a scope of work for the evidence room, the interrogation room, and things of this order of magnitude that may come down the pike. We don't have a scope to know what is required. Without knowing what's required, I don't see how we can't possibly bid it yet. So I think we should take our best guess at coming, because the female locker room is within our purvey. We're not meeting state standards or requirements, so we can go ahead and do it how best we think it should be executed. Yeah, the economy of scale, Bob, would be something, but it's not going to be even 10% of the number.
Okay.
And I so thank you for that. Thank you for the clarity on that. I don't think the economy of scale fits here, not only because we don't understand the scope, but because we're talking about doing a municipal building. And so if we're going to do if we're going with the feasibility and we're spending money for that and time and effort, then we have to know that we plan in the future for that kind of work.
Mhm.
Judy, I'd add to that, I agree, if the feasibility study is done now and then the work's not going to be ready for, there really isn't a financing plan for it yet. So, we're at least a couple of years off.
Yes, but I think we need appropriate accommodations for female officers now.
Agreed. I have a couple of other questions for the chief.
Sure.
Gas is the budget still good for the gas? Was it 20,000? Think that's still gonna hold up?
I hope so. We'll do our best. I'll put the guys on foot if I have to.
Foot patrol.
Yes.
Just another gee whiz question, chief.
Yep.
During the summer, do you hire temp officers, to cover the Nahant Beach or any of the extra people that are here in the summer?
So we have about 15 reserve police officers that we rely very heavily on throughout the summertime.
And does the state provide any aid for that?
No, they do not.
Okay, so, but there is some public safety that you're covering for the Nahant Beach, is that right?
Long Beach, are you referring to Long Beach?
Yeah.
So we don't patrol that. We have concurrent jurisdiction with the state police and the DCR Rangers. We'll respond. We answer the 911 calls for the town. We'll respond, but we also notify them, and they come in and basically take over.
Is there a case to be made for more state aid? Or, our.
I never thought of it, but there could quite possibly be, yes.
Allison,
Especially with the influx of the cars coming into there.
Allison, is that something that's been talked about with the town administrator or the selectman?
No, not specifically. Mm-mm.
So I don't know if there's a next step there or not, but something to think about.
Certainly.
Tim, isn't the other item, so we're still on the question of the accreditation for the department, and we discussed that in some detail. I've had to do that for education departments, and so we can, it's coming down the road and we don't even have the guidelines yet, but it's going to be a whole huge process. And you know that, and we'll keep talking about it. Isn't a police cruiser also?
It's part of the capital.
Right.
Yep.
So you've mentioned salaries, and we have the need for a female locker room.
Yep.
The third would be, as part of the capital, right, would be the police cruiser. Am I correct?
I think we're talking about the software, the Power
Oh,
DMS.
right.
It's
Is the
kind of-
cruiser, when was
pricey.
when was the cruiser? The cruiser's
So-
further down?
We usually put the cruiser in the capital,
Okay,
and adding to the capital, we're looking to do additional things, such as female locker room, etc.
but we did talk, you want to say something about the software? Because we discussed that in some
Sure.
detail, and why that
Absolutely.
might be better to start sooner rather than later. So
Yep.
why don't you give us your sense of that?
So with that being said, certification process is mandatory. So the next step from that would be a voluntary accreditation. This software that I'm looking at, it's called Power DMS. It's about $10,000 annually. It basically streamlines the certification process with policies and procedures, distribution of them, and the initial certification process and recertifications and accreditations. Most other police departments in this area are using them. It works parallel with MPAC, which is the Municipal Police Accreditation Committee that governs the state right now.
Question, is the 10K an annual thing, or do you just buy the package and we're done?
No, it's annual. Because what we do is we upload everything and they basically maintain it for us, and we distribute it as necessary.
So that's going to be an operating thing to, going forward.
Yep.
So is your thought that we should start that when? That we should-
Soon, because like I said, the certification process for both the department and individual officers is already a mandate.
And is there money for that then, Chief?
As far as grant money, I
Yes,
don't know.
state funded money?
I don't believe so.
And so the FY23 budget proposal, we've increased the technology services line item for this.
And is our current technology able to access it?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
We don't anticipate any of that, and then someone needs to make certain that the training is completed, complied, all of that. Is that just part of administration?
Yes.
Okay. What are the differences in the budget then, Chief?
So getting back to our reserve officers, we had to increase some training expenses because of the state, because of the police reform. They mandated that we have to send our reserve officers back to what they're calling the Bridge Academy, which is an additional 200 hours of training. And then at that completion of that, they have to apply for an exemption to remain as a reserve officer with us. The police reform and post, I could talk ad nauseum about that. I mean, I have notes in front of me, but that would just go on and on and on. The long and short of it is it's mandated that we send these officers back. And that's why we had to increase some of the training expenses.
So a reserve officer has 5 weeks of mandated training just to retain whatever the word is, certification as a reserve officer?
That's correct. And most of our reserves work full-time. So 3 of those weeks are in person. So they have to take 3 weeks off from their full-time job.
Wow.
Yeah, it's a lot.
Chief, this is Dana Sheehan again. I have a follow-up question on that. I'm looking at the budget, and is the reserve officers compensation part of the regular full-time employees line item? Or part-time? No. Is it in here? It's on, I'm looking at tab 3B, the budget worksheet.
I'm probably looking at a different sheet. We have reserve officers / constables, which we went up a little bit on that.
Okay,
Yeah, Dana, that line for reserve officers is where they're paid from. And so that's what we bumped up a bunch in the proposed
Good.
budget.
To cover that new training.
Correct.
36,800.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Chief.
Okay, body cams. They're what I heard, or I thought I heard, was not required now, likely to be required at some point in the future. Is there anything to be gained by just doing it now?
I mean, certainly, however, the biggest thing would be the initial cost and then the maintenance of it.
Do we have a sense what the cost is?
I don't actually. I have a meeting next week with the body camera company.
Allison, would that fit into the ARPA funds?
Yes, it could be something that we could look to use ARPA funds for, yes.
Are we still looking for things to use ARPA funds on?
Yes.
Yes, so we have some room to play with on the ARPA fund side, and we're trying to balance, some of these capital needs that we're not planning to fund with free cash with ARPA, so. we're
Right,
doing a little bit of
I
juggling.
just, if we have an opportunity to use ARPA funds on something that's actually required, that makes
Yep.
much more
Yeah.
sense to me than something that may be required at some time that we don't know the scope.
Exactly.
I agree strongly, Dan McMagan speaking. I think that, that this is not a requirement. Certainly, I suspect the officers are not eager to wear body cams. And the thing that we have to remember is it's not the cameras. It's the IT system that backs up the cameras. And the cost of this is likely to be stable or go down. So I would, say that we, keep this on our thought process, but I would list this as a not this year kind of thing.
If you can fund it with ARPA now and carry over and decrease future funding, it might be a good idea.
Yes.
Okay.
If we can't burn up the ARPA funds on must-dos.
And Chief Furlong, you
Yep.
I thought you mentioned there were there's grant money available now for the body cams.
Correct.
Does that potentially go away if we defer it, if we push it out?
Yeah, most likely.
Ooh. Mm.
Well, that's certainly a good reason not to pass up a free lunch.
Mm-hmm.
Grants before ARPA.
Grants before ARPA.
Right.
It sounds like some sort of a rallying cry.
Yeah, so my thought process would be, the chief said that he has a meeting with the vendor. I think that we'll have a discussion, after that, to have a better idea of what the cost is. We should definitely look at grant opportunities if those are easy to apply for, and then we could supplement with ARPA funding. I think that would be probably the preferred procedure.
Makes sense.
Okay. Is there a training cost to this as well?
I'm sure there will be.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So yeah, I mean, let's get at least an order of magnitude of what this will cost and what's potentially available.
Yep.
Yeah, I think the key is the funding sources.
Yep.
Yes. Okay, Dana, you were showing with your hand up, and I don't know whether that's a leftover from before or.
It's leftover. Sorry about that, Bob.
Okay, no worries. And then my last question, honest, I promise. What was the dollars per gallon kind of assumption built into this budget?
That's Allison.
There wasn't a dollars per, per gallon assumption. It was honestly just based on, you know, the budget that was there prior. And I'm trying to see, let me look at what we ended up doing for police. So for each department that has a vehicle and utilizes, you know, has a gas account, we either bumped it up or level funded or bumped up somewhere else and, you know, so that it could be covered. But it's not based on a dollars per gallon.
Okay. Okay, and DeWitt, you have both hand, you have your virtual hand up and your real hand up.
Well, I turned the camera on. What's the percentage increase of this year's budget over last year's budget?
For gas or in total?
In total, overview, thank you.
Allison, do you have that
So-
figure?
I have it. For police, it's 4.9%. And I think that you have to keep in mind, you know, this is the last year of the police contract and all the officers are getting a 3% increase. That also means that some of the other salary lines are being bumped up because they're based on, it's a percentage of salary. So like ed incentive is going up. You know, EMT stipend is based on a percentage of salary. And then also, you know, Chief Furlong is new and is in the process of negotiating a contract or finalizing his contract with the town administrator. So we've figured in those costs as well. But overall, salary plus operating expense is 4.9%.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Okay, and any more questions, comments, discussions on the police budget?
So if I just may, in closing,
Yes, please.
this is closing. The day I got sworn in, I announced that you basically, the town and the police department is basically getting an extension of Chief Dwyer. And I know Chief Dwyer did a phenomenal job with the numbers and monitoring the budget. And he guided me along, and we have the perfect person in our administrative assistant in Mariana. She gives me weekly updates as far as where the money is and how much we have left and what we can spend. So again, I appreciate everything Chief Dwight did for me, and he taught me along the way. And you're basically getting an extended version of him as far as the spending of the police budget.
Okay, thank you. We will not call you Dwyer 2, though.
Chief Furlong, as we close out police, I'd like to freeze or have a consensus on the number for the build out for the women's locker room. What's the number that is being floated that we want consensus on?
I think you touched upon it, 20 to 30,000. Again, I'm no contractor whatsoever. I don't know the first thing about construction costs, but I can't imagine that's going to be a cheap thing to just put together.
No, it's yeah. My thought is let's go with the 30, and if that becomes problematic, revisit it as a reserve fund item.
You're
If
splitting a
it's
room.
the
How
locker
much
room-
how much could splitting a room cost?
Well,
I'm also looking to. Go ahead, Dan.
You have first you have to do studs. You have to take a look at it structurally. Where you're putting the footer plate and the head plate. You have to integrate the drywall with existing. Then anytime we're talking about a bathroom here.
That's
So-
my question. So we're
so-
talking
it's
about plumbing and sewer.
Yeah, we're talking about plumbing and sewer. A bathroom. I mean, even the most inexpensive bathroom that has the most inexpensive drywall enclosure with 2 outlets on it is all of 30,000.
Yep.
And then you have flooring, ceilings, and then you have HVAC. Another, oh shit, oh, we got to put doors in. You know, every door is a couple of $1,000. So it seems like, oh, we're just creating an enclosure, but by the time you get done with all this, I don't mean to be the bearer of bad news, but I just built out my building. I've got that underway. I've got a dairy that we're building in New Hampshire, and this kind of number is correct order of magnitude.
Thank you.
And Tim, are you moving ahead with getting, a feasibility study and any kind of estimate on that? Dan, I can't remember. Is that happening?
On the women's locker room?
Right.
Yeah, I've reached out to a couple contractors to get quotes.
Okay. And when do you think those quotes will be coming in?
I hope soon.
Oh, that's
Everyone
right.
Everyone
You
keeps
had to
blowing me
wait
off
because of
COVID.
COVID. They
Yep.
didn't come.
Yep.
Remember discussing that. Yep.
So
Okay.
I did have one gentleman come today, and he actually did agree that 30,000 would be sufficient.
That's what I wanted to, good, because you had mentioned that what you hope. Great. Okay.
Yeah.
And I think that's a good approach, Chief, for what the scope of work is. Do it as a design build with the contractor, rather than have feasibility, project manager, architect go through multiple steps, each of which adds cost but not a hell of a lot of value. A
Mhm.
design build from a reputable contractor is I think appropriate in this case.
So right now, the way that the FY23 police budget appears in the spreadsheets that you have, we're funding the capital line at 65, which is meant to fund a cruiser, and then have a little bit of that go towards the women's locker room. And then our intention will be to fund the difference through ARPA funds. So that won't appear in any of the documents that, well, actually in that second spreadsheet that you guys have in your FinCom book, we'll be adding that to the ARPA column, but it's not going to affect the general fund for the police department.
So we're not, the portion that we would fund through ARPA will not be appropriated here or anywhere.
Exactly, correctly. Yep, correct.
So that number is 65. The increment would be possibly 20. So we're contemplating a scoop of 20 out of the ARPA funds.
Yes, right
correct?
now I had already planned for 10 to come out of the ARPA funds, but upon further discussion with the chief the other day, we'll probably take another, so a total of 20, you're correct.
Is that the 20, is that going to the new locker room and the cruiser, or just the locker room?
Yeah, so right now, as presented the FY23 administrator's budget, on the capital outlay line, there's 65,000.
Right.
55 of that will be for the cruiser,
Right,
and it
I
was
knew that,
intended
yeah.
10 of it would go to the locker room.
Okay.
Then we'll also say we'll fund the additional 20 through ARPA, which you
Okay.
won't see in any of your documents.
Thank you. Got it.
And Chief, we're confident that the 55 number gets us not only the vehicle, but the conversion to interceptor, and more importantly, the IT features that must be added on inside the vehicle. The
Correct.
computers, so all of that's covered by 55.
Yes, that was just about what the cost last year was for the new cruiser. I don't foresee the prices going up that drastically. So yeah, that's sufficient.
All right.
So may I just ask, what did we decide about proceeding, going ahead with the new software and the body cams? Because we should.
So
I'd
I'm
like to
gonna,
get a sense of where we are.
I have a meeting with the body cam, a body cam company, manufacturer. I'll get a more solid figure as to what it's gonna cost for the Nahant police to be outfitted for body cameras. As far as the software goes, there was an increase in our technology services to go ahead with that.
Okay,
Okay, so
Thank you.
software's in the budget, body cams right now is kind of an open item.
right,
Correct.
that's what, yeah,
Okay,
And my concern would be that as we come up with a body cam number, we come up with the all-in number so that the vendor isn't just selling vests with cameras attached to them, that he has the comprehensive IT solution that has the servers and all of the system that retains those images.
yep.
And perhaps the training as well.
Mhm.
Yes, good point. Yes.
All right, so are we okay with police and ready to move on?
Tim, is there anything else you want to ask us?
I don't think so. Again, it's my first go round, so I'm still learning and taking it all in.
All right,
Oh, and it was also very helpful when Dan and I met with you. I mean, you went into everything in great detail, and we saw, and Mariana also, and was there. And
Mhm.
it's nice to hear you thank her, because I know you worked together really well.
We
And that
do.
was very apparent to us also. So looked good.
all right.
Thank you.
So Barbara and Dan, before we move on to fire, I'm going to ask the question, while we still have Chief Furlong here and Chief Antrim, should we talk about the public safety building or the possibility of the public safety building while everybody is here? And then close with fire?
I would suggest we table that. That is a lengthy discussion on so many fronts. I would suggest we table that discussion. We touched on it, Barbara and I, with our meeting with the chief, who was very generous. Mariana was outstanding, in her accessibility of all numbers and activity. But that's a very large topic.
It could even be a special meeting, I would think.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. Is there anything that may impact this year's budget related to it, whether that's feasibility studies or I don't know what else it might be, but
Yes, so right now we have it as a separate article on the warrant to fund the feasibility study. Again, the architect that's coming out next week is going to give us a better idea of the cost. The way that it's presented right now to be funded is that half of it would be funded with free cash and half would be funded through borrowing. Because I have an estimate of $500,000, but I don't know if
for a
that's.
feasibility study?
Yes. Mhm.
Well, holy cat.
Yep. So, I've tried to do some research on what the cost of, a feasibility study for a public safety building is. Many of the ones that I found, the cost is rolled into the entire construction cost. So it was kind of
Yes.
hard to parse out what the feasibility portion was. I did find, though, a memo from a town administrator, and I forget in what town, but he had requested $500,000 for a similar study. So that's what we have in there right now. But again, we'll find out more when we meet, with the architect next week.
Because that sounds like an awful lot of money
Mhm.
just for the feasibility study. Does anyone else have that? I mean,
Yes.
I agree with you, Barbara. I think order of magnitude, typical A&E numbers come in 3 to 6% of the total build out number. It seems like if the feasibility study is actually a full set of architectural design plans and I mean, the $500,000 numbers to me doesn't sound like a feasibility study. It sounds like biddable documents for to RFQ it. I mean, that's a heavy number, and I would agree with the number, at sufficient drawings, plans, and scope to build the building. But I think it's heavy for a concept discussion.
Hey, Dan, that 3 to 5% number, I mean, if you do the math, it comes out to a $10 million building. Does that sound in the ballpark?
We
No,
both did the same math.
I mean, my WAG on the building is 15 to north of 20.
Do we have a
Based on square footage, the square footage construction prices per square foot, like on the means catalogs, which give you pricing for construction in various parts of the country. And I'm sure that's what the feasibility part of it would be done, accomplished with, is depending on the square footage and on. I think we're touching on a very massive topic here that could be hours of discussion.
Oh, yeah, I agree.
In homework.
So, Allison, do we have a site in mind for this building? I mean, we seem like we're not there at a feasibility study yet.
Right.
Would be part of the feasibility study, wouldn't it?
Yes.
Yeah, so if you would like me to talk about this, I can try and be as brief as you would like, or if you want to move this to another
I think we should move
meeting,
on.
we can do that.
Okay, Austin. That's a good segue.
All right. Is there a Cliff Notes version of this?
I will do my best. So as Allison mentioned, the architectural firm that conducted the study in 2015 will be coming next week to meet with myself, Chief Furlong, and Tony. In 2015, there was $15,000 allocated that was supposed to look at the fire station structure. That was expanded to look at the fire station, police station, and 3 sites, assessing the potential for either addressing the buildings individually or as a public safety building. That figure was insufficient to produce a report that had enough information to move forward at all. It didn't really narrow down what the space needs of the fire department or the police department are. It did a very cursory look at property that the town owns, that the fire station currently sits on, that the school property sits on, and that the police station sits on. What the town administrator was hoping to achieve is to get a more in-depth analysis of both buildings and the potential sites, to assess whether the town even has the land to build a public safety building, because there have been a number of public safety buildings and police stations and fire stations built in Massachusetts in the last few years. And based on current standards, it's going to be much larger than it won't resemble the size of the buildings that exist at all today. Even the total square footage of the fire station is less than half what just an apparatus bay built to today's standards would be. So you're talking a much, much larger building. And with the limited space, it's going to be difficult to have a combined building potentially. So they're going to assess exactly what the needs of the police are, exactly what the needs of the fire station are, and assess whether that's possible given the land in Nahant, and if not, where addressing both buildings separately would go. So Tony is hoping that amount of funding will lead to him being able to move forward with a recommendation in a future year for design or design build cost. And I was on the committee that looked at this in 2015. Once you get to the stage where you want to procure a designer, you have to hire a OPM, or owner's project manager, and the combined cost and that project manager puts the design out to bid. The total cost of the owner's project manager and design is for public safety buildings is 10%. The average cost of the buildings that have been built recently in this area have been about $650 per square foot. And Nahant falls into the prevailing wage rate of Boston. So our prevailing wage rate is a little higher than some of the other buildings that have been built recently. Like Essex, for example, just completed a public safety building. But our cost per square foot would be higher because of the higher prevailing wage rate. So that 500,000 may be a high number. The architect said he will get us a quote or an estimate within 2 days of our meeting, which is on the 23rd. So we will have a firm number shortly on what the feasibility study will be.
Well done.
And
Questions?
Dana Sheehan, that question about the overall cost, I mean, this seems like it's gonna be a substantial endeavor. And I don't see how we're gonna get out of have to do an override for this. Would you
Yeah,
agree?
yes.
Yeah, typically these are funded through a debt exclusion override.
Okay, like Dan said, this is a big topic.
Oh,
Would a new building also include the DPW in addition to police and fire?
Other towns haven't done it that way, Bill. As I look at, the other towns that I have, that I work in, they have kept that separate. Most of them have gone to a public safety building here in Norwood, for instance, public safety. But no one that I'm aware of has integrated the town yard and the highway department folks.
Should we plan maybe to meet after you have met with these people about the feasibility study? That seems to be the time for us to have a dedicated meeting, perhaps.
yes, I agree. Yeah, so let's is table the right word? Table this until after the meeting with the architect, and then we'll have a better sense as to what the cost of the feasibility study would be, what the deliverables would be, and revisit it at that point. But for now, we just, keep in the back of our heads that there is likely to be a warrant article asking for the feasibility study. And it could be a substantial sum of money. It's not a $15,000 effort. All right, further questions, comments, discussions on that, on the public safety building? And then if not, Austin, I'm sorry, Chief Antrim. Old habits are hard to break. I guess the floor is yours for the fire department budget. And I suppose I should ask either both Barbara and Dan if you have introductory comments here first.
Yes, Austin was very generous. Chief Antrim was very generous. Took us through the facilities, gave us a comprehensive review of his existing apparatus and his existing facility, and it's evident that some dough for greater stewardship is indicated.
And he had prepared an outstanding PowerPoint that was very detailed, and also very interesting to see with the whole history of the various buildings and how they evolved over time, and the relationship of the size of the buildings to the size of the equipment, the pumpers, etc. So we got a very detailed, but also in-depth, going way back. What was the date? I forget when it started, but there was this.
Yeah, I went a bit overboard. I did go back to the 1800s.
There you go. But it really did give a sense of the relationship of the size to the equipment and the whole sort of history of where the equipment was stored over the years. It wasn't, it was in the basement of Town Hall, right?
Yes.
For quite some time. And so all of those, it was a very interesting presentation and we appreciated it. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, the rest of the committee should probably thank Barbara and Dan. I held them for over 3 hours, I think, boring them with those details.
Not boring.
Thank you.
It was fascinating, to see how we got where we are,
Right.
Sure.
over the decades.
All right, so I will get into the operating budget. As far as the salaries section, there's a $32,008 increase over the current fiscal year. The majority of that is contractual increases, same as the police department. There is an increase in the line item for call firefighter retainer. That is something we had worked with Tony on a couple of years ago to try and just give a little more incentive for our call firefighters to attend and complete the fire academy, which we require, and then to stick around once they have completed the academy, so that they get a higher retainer for completing it, but it's broken out over a couple of years based on their continued response and attendance at training. So that's a 3.13% increase in salaries over the prior year's budget or current year's budget. Do you have any specific questions on the salaries portion before I move on? No? Okay. In the services and supplies, there is a substantial increase in this year's budget, but it is primarily in the capital outlay line item. So there's a $47,506 increase over the current year budget. My notes, 2.5% of that is for a contractual agreement we have with the city of Lynn to provide dispatch services. 1.19% is, sorry, 1.19% is an increase in some of our vehicle maintenance and ambulance supply costs. And then 19.7% of it is proposed one-time expenditure or capital on the fire station. I did not want to ask for any money for the fire station because I do feel it's wasted money. The building needs to be replaced. But we have had the roof, the siding, the windows are all over 20 years old. We had 2 roof leaks this fall. One caused a bit of interior water damage. Those 2 sections of the roof were addressed primarily through insurance. The interior repairs are being addressed through insurance. But the roof over the apparatus bay is in terrible condition. It is likely to also develop leaks in the near future. So I did receive a quote to replace that roof. And I had requested $25,000, which has been placed into that capital outlay line item. The windows have also really become a problem. They're incredibly drafty. Several of them don't latch anymore. So when there's strong gusts of wind, they fall open. And it's in the room that the men sleep in, so, or the personnel sleep in. So it's they become problematic. And I've asked for another $25,000 to address the 18 windows. They're vinyl replacement windows. They will be replaced with vinyl replacement windows just to sort of tighten up the building and make the living conditions slightly more tolerable until a plan to address the buildings is finalized. Do you have any other questions on those items or the any other questions in the supplies and services portion of the budget?
So Allison, can we use that money, ARPA money for the building pieces? to fix the building?
Sorry, so what we're proposing to do, we increased the capital outlay budget line item, and we're proposing to use free cash to cover that. Because again, this, for FY '23, we have a higher level of free cash. So we're using it for these one-time expenses. We're actually using free cash to fund almost all the capital outlay items throughout the budget within each department.
And I understand, Chief, it frustrates me though, to put money in it, to throw good money after bad.
Yes. Well, we're
Allison,
partially
isn't it better to
operating.
do the ARPA for that and use free cash to retire debt? Because you can't use ARPA for retiring debt.
Great question.
She muted
Sorry, I
herself.
was on mute.
Yeah.
I keep muting. I'm sorry. My son is in the back, so I don't want to have him be too loud. But we're using free cash to pay down a bunch of debt too. I think we're putting $500,000 worth of free cash towards paying down debt. So, you know, we're doing a combination of both.
Can't use ARPA, right, to pay down debt.
You can't, no. You can't use it to pay down debt, and you can't put it into a stabilization fund. Those are the two things you cannot use ARPA funds for.
So can it be used for windows and roof on the existing firehouse? And I think, you know, the view from 30,000 feet is as much as we are all loath to have a sunk cost into that facility, which is clearly inadequate. There's almost no way that we don't need to get at least 6 more years, if not more, out of that facility if we started design today and had capital today, which obviously is 18 to 24 months away. We'd have another 2 years of building to have a public service building. So I think we do need to have the reasonable stewardship in terms of roof, siding, windows today, because under any circumstance, we've got to get 5 to 8 years out of that facility. And it's clearly indicated that it's appropriate. The question in my mind is how much, if any, ARPA funds can be used for this?
We could use ARPA funds to fund anything related to the costs of the building, because it falls under, you know, maintenance of a municipal building, and that's an allowable expense. So it's just, you know, determining what that cost is. The thing with the ARPA funds is we have until 2024 to spend them. So if we, you know, if we have a better idea of those, you know, necessary things that need to be fixed at the fire station, once we know the cost of those, we have a little bit more time than having to present something at town meeting with a fixed cost, because the ARPA funds don't have to be appropriated. It's up to the town administrator and the Board of Selectmen, you know, on approving the use of those.
Allison, so there's a couple, I'm sorry, a chat
Go
from
right ahead.
DeWitt that
Yeah.
says grants before ARPA and ARPA before free cash. And Dan, thank you for the time frame, because when I talk about throwing good money after bad, I didn't realize we're talking like 8 years. Wow.
I certainly hope it does not take that long. This is a very unhealthy building. There's a law was passed a couple of years ago in Massachusetts that makes cancer for police and firefighters and assume there's a presumption law, so it's presumed to be work related. And this building is, when the water damage occurred from this recent storm, before anyone would come work on it because of the age, they tested for asbestos. All of the walls and the ceilings of the apparatus bay and the boiler room and one of our storage rooms are made of asbestos paneling. Some of it is in terrible shape. The ceiling in the boiler room is falling down. All of those things will have to be addressed if these buildings don't get addressed sooner than that. I know the
Frankly, if
design-
we're in a position where the safety of our employers are at jeopardy and it's physically visible, and it's physically visible jeopardy, let's stop there. We do need to fix it.
yes.
True, and we can certainly encapsulate it. We don't have to, I'm thinking just even if we went to this town meeting and had a number, which we don't, had a design, which we don't, for a public safety building, which takes a year to get, then we would have to get the money. And then we would have to, before this, we had to figure out, is it one building or two? Where is it going? There are many, many different points in this decision path. Then you get to a civil construction build out. And at the best of times, from when you're holding the blueprints and you're holding a bucket of money to execute, you're still looking at a year from award of the RFQ. The whole RFQ process is going to take months and months. I think we're looking at a substantial issue here, and what is reasonable in terms of duration to build a municipal building. And maybe the discussion with the architect this week, that query can be made to them. I'm assuming they're municipal guys that can talk to this with great insight. But I would suggest we ask these architects, what is the critical path and the likely duration of this. And then that said, if we're looking at having to have town employees and staff in any point of an exposure, then we want to encapsulate any sort of any sort of asbestos. There are many, many, many millions of Americans that work in buildings that have asbestos. Sometimes asbestos is encapsulated, sometimes it's not. But I think we have to bear in mind the realities of funding and the realities of the duration to execute construction projects. So I'd say, hey, let's talk to these architects this week, say what they say to the flash to bang time is, and then consider some sort of mitigation encapsulation as we're concerned about exposure to asbestos that is likely to be free floating and present any kind of a health exposure risk.
So all great points, Dan. Thanks for raising those. Austin, can I just get what's your square footage now? You're working on there.
The total square footage of this building is 4,400.
And how much is the tent?
That's a good question. That does not include the tent.
I mean, that's obviously part of the existing infrastructure.
Yeah, the tent is, I believe, 50 feet by 30 feet. So another 1,500.
And you're probably going to need double that in a contemporary facility.
And then the police department, Chief Furlong, what's your square footage now?
I believe it's 3,200.
And what do you think you would need?
Well, it all depends. I would like to be able to house the Humvee that EMD has, along with the creation of a sally port for the prisoners. So a little bit more.
That's what this study will address. A large portion of it is programming to identify exactly what the needs are of the police department and the fire department, and then use current architectural standards. One example is the distance between our current apparatus is from the wall to the side of the apparatus in some cases is less than 12 inches. And between the apparatus is maybe 2 feet. Current standards are 4 feet on either side of any apparatus for a total of 18 feet for every apparatus bay. So, you know, we are talking massive increases in square footage here.
Well, I think we're getting down a path towards,
Sure, yeah.
We're starting to prepare for the space attack. I don't think we can get answers tonight. The architecture meeting will shed some light on the go forward plan, but I think it's going to be a lot of its own meetings dedicated to public safety building development and execution.
And
So
when is it that you're meeting with the architects? So when will we have more information?
We're meeting on the 23rd, and he says he can have a estimate and a scope within 2 days of that meeting.
Be invaluable.
So by the 25th, something like that. So by
Yes.
the end of this month.
Yes, correct.
And then will we get that information before town meeting?
Absolutely, yeah.
All right, so that information, meaning just, just the results of your preliminary meeting with him. He or she is not going to complete this whole study.
No, the intent is to get an estimate.
Yeah, okay.
So that
Yep.
Tony and Allison have a more solid number for how
Yeah.
much will be needed this year.
well, they may be able.
I thought.
Excuse me,
this was
go ahead,
estimate
Barbara.
is for the feasibility study. What is the estimate? Is that what it's for?
Correct, yes.
It's an estimate for an estimate.
Right.
I think the one thing that I would we could hopefully come away with it from this is an order of magnitude timeline from flash to bang to execute.
Yep.
So that we can know all this, because as we address these sunk costs in the existing facilities, the duration becomes significant.
Right, and another whole piece of this project is just making sure the public is informed and the public is on board with this, because it is such a substantial investment that it's just an absolute necessity. The whole I don't even know what to call it, the building public awareness and support.
Exactly.
Yes.
It looks like it's gonna be about $12 million, based on yesterday's dollars, at least. I mean, that's probably just the down payment, but based on $650 square foot and doubling the fire space, doubling the police department space, about 12 million, plus the feasibility study.
Yep.
We'll know better at the end of the month.
Yeah.
Okay.
Again, if we can't come to a consensus that if the feasibility study is worthwhile, that we plan to do something about it, then maybe we don't do anything about the feasibility study. I just don't see the value of having a study where we know that we're not going to do anything. Is that cynical?
Not
I
that we're
think
not gonna
we
do
don't have a
anything.
choice. Judy, I think the
I
building
agree, Austin.
absolutely has to
I
be
mean,
addressed.
Austin Chief, but I agree. I think we're, it's new. I don't think we have a choice either. I think we've talked about this for the 5 or 6 years I've been on the committee. If the building isn't getting any better or any younger, and it was never really meant for as long term as you've had it. And between that and Chief Furlong, we have a problem.
Yes, we do.
But how much does one little town need? That's the question.
Right.
Exactly. We don't need a facility that's we don't need a facility the size of Lynn, but we do need a facility.
Yeah,
I believe we do.
Right, we got to do something, no matter what.
Right, we got to
I
stop talking.
would recommend that you walk over and you see that you can't even walk beside the.
I've been there. I know. I believe truly that we need
I
to do
couldn't
something.
even walk down beside the fire trucks. I had to you've seen it, Judy, you understand.
Yeah, you're spot on. That facility is a mess. if you'll excuse the expression. And our employees deserve better.
Will there be alternatives or sort of a must-have, nice-to-have kind of a thing that comes out of this meeting? Even this early on, I mean, I realize it's,
That I'm not sure about. I think there's,
to Judy's point, where she says, you know, we better be realistic and get to this sometime soon.
right.
That still means money, you know?
I mean, both this architectural firm and the gentleman who is coming is familiar with both buildings and the sites. I think he's looking for a discussion with myself, Chief Furlong, and Tony to get a sense of exactly what the town is looking to accomplish with this study, and then he'll give us a price and a scope of work based on that. And then out of that study would be hopefully a solid recommendation on how to address both buildings
Right.
that the town can then decide to act on or not act on.
Given the size of this, did we have to bid it?
Tony and Allison had a discussion about that, and we're going to look into that, I believe.
Yeah, so my understanding is we don't have to bid architectural services, but we likely would because of the amount that it's going to cost. We want it to be a public process.
If you would like me to move on, there is a large fire department related capital item that I'm requesting this year that is not the building.
Larger than a public safety building?
Not larger than a public safety building, but the cost of it in the next fiscal year will be larger than the feasibility study, yes.
Ouch, okay.
So I am requesting replacement of one of our fire engines. The cost of a replacement will be between $700,000 and $750,000. If we were to sign a contract by June 1st, it would be closer to 700,000. There is expected to be a 10% increase sometime between June 1st and August. So this is replacing, we have 2 fire engines, 1 ladder truck. That's our fire apparatus. The fire engine that's being replaced was built in 2003, delivered in 2004. It's now 18 years old. It has been problematic for the department for a number of years. A lot of mechanics have looked at it. I will try not to get too in depth, but basically it is dangerous for firefighters to be using hoses that are supplied by that fire engine inside a building. It does not, the protective measures that are built into fire pumps do not function on that engine. And the cost to repair that, and I mentioned this to Dan and Barbara, if the engine were 10 years old or less, I would be asking for money to repair that, which would probably be in the $200,000 range, possibly more. But because of the age of the vehicle and the corrosion on it and other issues, mechanical issues, it should just be replaced. By NFPA standards, typically a frontline fire engine would be moved to reserve status after 15 years and then permanently retired after 20 years. Obviously, our fire engines are not as busy as Lynn or other departments, so we tend to get a little more life out of them. But this was a sort of bargain engine at the time it was purchased. It was purchased through a grant. All 3 fire engines or all 3 fire apparatus that we currently have were all purchased with grants. The 4 fire apparatus before that were purchased with federal emergency money from the blizzard of '78. So last time Nahant has funded the purchase of a fire engine was 1976. And I believe Tony and Allison were working through possibly funding some of this through ARPA funds and some through borrowing. They will the manufacturer, this would be purchased through a collective procurement program that we have used before. It will basically mirror the design that was used on our more recent engine, which is built in 2018, which is, you know, a quality engine. We expect it to last. And I don't know, if you have any further questions, I'll try not to just ramble about, because I can get really in depth as Barbara and Jan now.
Well, we do have, we have a new fire truck,
Correct, yes.
right? How much business do all the fire trucks get at once?
So all three of our fire apparatus get dispatched for any fire-related call, basically. We
I don't
also
think-
have,
I'm
sorry.
sorry.
Go ahead.
No,
So there, basically the way the operation works is if there's a fire-related call, and that could be anything from just somebody hearing a smoke detector and calling it in. The crew that's on duty, if they're here and not on the ambulance or something, they take the newer engine, respond to the scene. If there's a fire, they begin setting up the hoses that would address the fire. But there's an onboard water tank that only supports about 5 minutes of firefighting. So you need another engine to come right behind that and connect to a fire hydrant and get that first engine water supply from the municipal water supply. Another benefit of having the second engine, aside from the critical role it plays at a fire, is when the other fire engine needs to go for service or any mechanical issues and is taken out of service, then this one becomes the only fire engine that we have to use. Unfortunately, there are a lot of mandates with related to emissions and other safety standards that are that emergency vehicles do not get exempt from. So they have a lot of very small electronic components, and those are prone to failure, especially in Nahant where there's so much salt. So even our new engine, it had a $20 sensor fail because of things going on with COVID and supply issues. It took 2 months to get one of those sensors, and we could not use our new engine during that period of time. So our 18-year-old dangerous engine became the only fire engine we had for 2 months during the summer.
I assume there's no grant money available.
There are grants, but we have been very fortunate with grants, and they are all based on the age of the equipment that you're seeking to replace. So we no longer meet the high priority threshold. They're still replacing engines and ladder trucks that are 40 years old for some departments, and they don't award a lot of those grants. I think the average is only a couple hundred of them throughout the country each award cycle once a year.
All right, so we did well in the past.
We did very well because we had very old equipment.
Chief,
Does the new engine, or would a new engine present any space issues?
No, it can fit where our new engine fits now or in the tent, the temporary structure. We would get rid of the old engine once a new engine is delivered. And just for perspective on the timeline on this, between procurement and signing a contract and finalizing the specifications and then the build time, even if this funding is approved, we're still looking at close to 2 years before we receive the new engine.
Whoa.
Yeah.
And the price is locked at
The price will be locked once we sign the contract.
Yeah.
And they do provide a discount. I don't have a detail on exactly how much of a discount. I can find that out, but
So what do we do
if
for
you
2
provide a
years?
down payment,
Yeah,
sorry,
so
What do we do for 2 years?
we will continue to use what we have.
you're a soldier
And
on.
everyone's aware of the limitations of this engine and
Chief.
the older engine. Yes.
To just recap, so obviously the newest engine, if it goes down, it can go down for a duration as we're awaiting parts, as we saw over the summer. My understanding, and this is, what I thought I heard, was that we also have a pumper feature on the ladder truck. So we effectively have two relatively new vehicles with pump features. Is that correct?
Yes. The ladder truck is now 8 years old. But yes, it does have a pump. It does carry
So
hose.
the ladder truck can function as a pumper.
Okay.
The other thing on the vehicle that we would hope propose to wash out, and believe me, I'm never one to turn down a free lunch, and I'd like to discuss the break point of the 750. What's comprised of free cash and what's comprised of ARPA? So are you thinking half and half, or what are we actually taking out of what's our skin in the game? Is it half?
So we were actually proposing borrowing for half of it and then using half to be funded by ARPA.
Okay.
Mhm.
So we incurred debt for half.
Correct.
My other question, Chief, is on the third pumper truck, the one that you used over the summer. Your explanation to me was the main objection with that unit is its ability to sense changes in downstream water pressure and demand and regulate that up and down. Would that pumper is your feeling that if you needed to use that, you could safely with one hose, not multiple hoses? Because it's clear to me that if you have multiple hoses and you're changing discharge rates with no feedback loop, it's obviously an invitation for trouble. But if you consider that a one hose unit, is that something? Obviously, over the summer you did use it. How much of a detriment could you talk to that?
Sure. Yeah, this is an engine that we use all the time. In what I referred to in the summer is that became our primary fire engine. And you are correct. It is. There's an electronic. It's called a pressure governor on that machine, so it senses pressure coming in and out of the pump and adjusts the RPM of the engine to compensate, so that when there's back pressure from one hose shutting down, it doesn't send that directly to any other hose line. So you're correct that if there is only one hose operating, there is not much danger from that.
So as we sit, we have a pumper that's relatively new, that just got its new sensor that we're happy with. We have a ladder truck with a pump feature that works well, that we're satisfied with. And we have an older unit, which could work okay with one hose. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Thank you. Okay.
Okay.
So just to summarize the summary, that means that there are 3 working pumper hoses, right?
Yes. Yeah, the ladder truck, it does have that capacity. We do use it in that capacity. Without getting too in depth, a city like Boston, for example, when they purchase a ladder truck, they want it as light and as quick to set up as possible. So they get their ladder trucks just strictly with an aerial and ground ladders. It doesn't carry any hose, water, and it does not have a pump. When they need to use that aerial to put water on a fire, if the fire is large enough, they have to dedicate a fire engine to it to provide water. So when we purchased this ladder truck that we got what's called a quint. So it is a ladder truck, but it also has the pump capacity. It carries a little bit of water, it carries hose. So it can do all of those things, but its primary function is as a ladder truck. So when that's responding, that's what its primary use is. It is to rescue people using that aerial and to create ventilation openings so that the firefighters can operate inside a building. It lets the heat and the smoke out.
Two related questions.
Yes.
If we are using the ladder truck as a pumper, does that eliminate its function as a ladder truck while it's doing that? That's question one. Question two is, when we're using it as a pumper, is it a full equivalent to one of the dedicated pumpers?
So to answer your first question, both the aerial and the pump on that ladder truck can be operated simultaneously. The issue becomes, it does affect the operation. So when the pump is engaged, there's a PTO or power takeoff from the engine. And once you have that in pump, that takes priority. So it takes away from the speed of being able to set up and use the ladder. That is one drawback from operating it in both functions at the same time. Also, the biggest problem is personnel. It takes a lot of personnel to operate that in both capacities, and we just do not have that kind of staffing. So typically when that shows up, you're either using it as a ladder truck or as a pumper if needed. And we have used it both ways recently.
Chief Antrim, how many feet of hose does each pumper in the ladder truck carry? And am I correct in recalling that the fire hydrants in town are on 600-foot centers? So you're never more than 300 feet away from
Yeah, that's not a firm
hydrant.
number. That's I think that distance is probably the average on sort of the main areas like Nahant Road, sort of the main water supply routes. There's typically a fire hydrant, probably 600 feet apart. There are minimum standards on how much hose engines have to carry. Both of our fire engines carry 1,000 feet of supply hose, which is what we would connect to the fire hydrant. And then they have, we have various pre-connected fire attack hose, and then we have some additional supply of, it's a 2.5-inch hose that can be used either as a supply hose or as a fire attack hose. So the two engines have the same amount of hose on them. The ladder truck, because of space limitations, cannot carry as much hose, and it's far more difficult to pack it back on there. So we prefer to use the engines when we're pulling hose off. But the ladder truck carries 800 feet of supply hose. It has two 200-foot attack fire hoses and a small supply of additional 2.5-inch hose if we need that for either supply or attack.
I have to, as we look at an environment of competing demand for limited funds or limitation in the reasonable ability of any entity, especially the town, to take on debt. We compete among other things. And in terms of incremental safety benefit, so in a perfect world where we're meeting the most contemporary fire standards, that would be terrific. But as we look at you know, a incremental benefit with and without uh, the new apparatus. So as it is, we could put out two pumping apparatuses, connect typically to a hydrant within 300 feet. If we use the older unit that was used over the summer, that would give us, if we consider that a one hose unit, we would have basically three pumpers and connection to reasonably close hydrants. So I have to raise the question, and I think this is a very subjective question that everyone has to answer themselves. And you know, we all, you know, are fearful of fire, and we look at the firefighters in Worcester and the tragedy there, and the Hotel Vendôme, and the circumstances of brave firefighters throughout our history. But I still have to ask myself, is there a measurable incremental benefit to the town to do this?
Sure. So I'll try and address that. The fire apparatus that we have, there's a group called the Insurance Services Office, I believe. It's ISO. I'm not sure I have that correct. It's something like that. But they conduct an assessment every few years of a community's ability, or a community's firefighting ability. So they assess the water supply, they assess your staffing, they assess your dispatch, your training, your fire apparatus, your hose, your maintenance, and they make a determination on what each community should have. So for Nahant, for decades, they have said we need a ladder truck with a 100-foot aerial, and we need 2 Class A fire engines. They also say we should have a reserve fire engine, which we have not had since the 70s or 80s, actually.
Even for a town this size.
Yeah, you know, the size of the community really doesn't matter. I was a volunteer in a rural department, and you know, if you have a fire in a structure, you're going to require the same amount of equipment and personnel. You know, whether it's a 2-story building in Nahant or a 3-story building in Lynn. You know, they have the capacity to throw a lot more equipment at it faster, and personnel, but you need the same base layer of apparatus and personnel arriving on scene, you know, within a reasonable time frame. To address the hose and fire hydrant comment, at a recent fire we had, the first hydrant we connected to broke when we opened it. So then we had to take the next hydrant, which was several hundred feet down the road. So you do run into those issues. There are areas in town that are not well protected by fire hydrants, or not as well. So there are longer distances. You know, some of the dead end streets and smaller streets and cul-de-sacs, they would require, you know, 500 or 600 plus feet of supply line. Once you get into those distances of laying a supply hose, it creates a great deal of friction loss and pressure loss. So even though we have great pressure in our municipal water supply, once that tries to travel down 600 feet of hose, it comes to almost a stop. So we have to position, when we have those long hose lays, you have to position an engine at the fire hydrant and connect to a device and pump the water to boost the pressure so it can make it to the engine that's operating at the fire scene. So it really does require having a minimum of 2 functional fire engines, fire pumps. And even though the ladder has a fire pump, its primary function is as the ladder or aerial device. So we really do need those 2 fire engines. And, you know, as far as the cost of this one, we are fortunate that we have gone through this process a few times in the last 10 years. So we've seen, the differences between the manufacturers and what they offer. The engine we're trying to replace was cheap when it was purchased, and we've been dealing with that ever since. It has had problems for its entire life. And because of that and those problems, we specifically designed our new engines to avoid those problems. And that does come with an increased cost, but this still is not the most expensive fire engine. It's cheaper than the two manufacturers that are more prevalent in this area. But for, if we went with one of those other manufacturers, we would get sort of one of their standard engines. We wouldn't have any input on customizing how we want the pump arranged and how we want the valves arranged to avoid the problems that we've had. So the manufacturer that we've gone with allows us to do that, within a reasonable price range by today's standards.
What's your ultimate constraint? Is it the equipment or is it the manning, the personnel?
The personnel is definitely a larger constraint, but if the amount of equipment we have, I believe, is appropriate. It's just that engine is at the end of its life. If we were to order an engine in the next several months, by the time it arrives, that engine will be at the end of its life, and it has problems that make it dangerous for our personnel.
Okay. And what makes it dangerous?
The pressure governor that regulates the pressure of the water being discharged from the pump does not function.
Okay, we talked about this. I'm sorry.
Yeah. It's okay.
All right, rest of the committee?
Public forum?
Yep, well, it's as soon as we agree that we have no more questions or discussion with the fire chief.
Oh, thank you very much.
Yes, I think it's been very thorough.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chief Antrim.
Yes, thank you. And so on top of our other meeting, we really have a very detailed sense of the fire department's needs.
Thank you. And I do want to thank all of you. I have been watching or attending finance committee meetings for a number of years. That has given me it has really helped me develop my understanding of the town's overall budget, how the fire department budget plays into that, the borrowing. And I've listened to the debate for years going on in the finance committee meetings. And as I get more time with the fire department budget, I will commit to you that I will run it as efficiently as possible. If I come to you with a request, it is because we absolutely need it. And I will not just spend money because it's there. It will only be spent if it's needed. So thank you for the education over the years, and thank you for your time that you volunteer. I know I've seen what a huge effort it is. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chief.
Okay. Thank you. DeWitt, I think you're right. I think actually there's an administrative matter in there. I still owe everyone the week-by-week schedule, but I believe next week we were going to do town government. And Allison, are you and Tony both available next week to talk
Yes.
through them?
Yeah, Tony wasn't available this week. I think that's why
Right.
you moved police and fire up.
Yeah.
So, yep, we'll be available next week.
Okay, and I'm gonna get in touch with Sheila. I think she wants, I don't know what it is, but I think she wants to talk about something. And who else should we ask a representative of the library trustees as well?
That one, I'd like to be very clear that we understand what's going to happen at town meeting with.
Exactly. Exactly, that was,
Don't want to see that happen again.
exactly, I don't want a repeat of that little.
The old switcheroo.
We don't need
Yeah.
to go into detail what it was. We just don't want it again.
Right. I was biting my tongue. I thought of a few things and I didn't just, okay. All right, so. Okay, so that's next week. Anything else administrative before we go on and ask for public forum? No? All right, so public forum, questions, comments, discussions from any members of the public? There really aren't any.
Motion to adjourn?
I think it's in order.
Second,
Second, third.
All
Brown
in-
eye.
Wait, who moved to adjourn? I need that.
Oh,
Dana.
Dana.
Dana, okay. And then DeWitt, you seconded. Thank you.
Brown eye.
McMacken, aye.
Warren, I.
Beatty, aye.
And Vanderslice, aye.
Sahara, I.
Then I think we are adjourned.
Thank you,
Great.
everybody.
Thank you, everybody. Have a good night.
Everyone.
Good
And
night, everyone. and
all.
Thank you,
Austin.
Book
Thanks,
Chiefs
Barbara.
as well.
Thank you.
Out here.
Okay, good night.